There we go. Hello, everybody. We're letting everybody into the room tonight. I'm Sherry. I'm your hostess, and we're going to ask just to put in the chat where you're coming in from tonight and what's your favorite mushroom. You can also go ahead and test the reaction buttons. I noticed that there's some new things on Zoom recently, so if you want to test some of those reactions, go right ahead. Let me just check out the chat here and see what we've got going on. Kelsey's just saying good evening. We're just waiting for people to join us, letting people into the room. If you want to type in your name, where you're joining us from. I have Olympia, and somebody says Candy Caps, Madison, Oregon. What's your favorite mushroom? Ruth from Waukesha, Minocqua, Bluets, Corn Smut. We were just talking about that. Puffball, Lion's Mane, and Reishi. All right. Few more people entering from the waiting room. Hello, everybody. We're just waiting for folks to join us. We've got Lion's Mane, Hi from St. Cloud, Giant Puffballs, Eureka. All right. Looks like that's all settling down. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to Community Conversations produced by Midwest Women's Herbal. We're delighted you're with us tonight. Midwest Women's Herbal is a woman-led and woman-empowered organization that has been producing herbal and personal growth events in person and virtually for over 13 years. To find out more, visit our website, midwestwomensherbal.com or herbwomenclassroom.com. Tonight's conversation is Women in Mycology, Grandmothers of the Ecosystem with Rose Tursi and Linda Conroy. I'm Sherry Ralish. I'll be your hostess this evening. If you've attended the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference or Mycelium Mysteries, I might look familiar. I've been attending both events for many years, and I've been a vendor and a sponsor. This year, I joined the coordinating team, and I'm really excited about that. So I'm also joined by a few other coordinators tonight. Ashley Oman and Courtney Hansen will be handling tech support. So if you have any audio problems, video problems, go ahead and send them a private chat or send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. There's other members of our community tonight. It takes a strong village to put on events like this, so please give them some love and gratitude, and we're grateful for each and every one of them. At this time, Alicia will read our mission and vision statements.
Thanks, Sherry. Our mission statement: Midwest Women's Herbal provides herbal education and opportunities for transformation. Immersed in the tradition of the village herbalist, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and children gather in a co-created village. Through earth-centered healing and nourishment, we ally with the plants that grow around us. From the ground up, we connect to weave ourselves, our families, and our communities into the dynamic spiral of health. And our vision statement: we live in a world where the feminine is honored and respected, where women stand fully in their power, acknowledging their wisdom, skills, and innate healing abilities.
Thanks, Alicia. In the coming days, we'll be sending you some emails with offers. We want to make sure you receive them. So we know sometimes those can go into spam. So you can add herbwomengmail.com to your contacts after tonight's conversation. When you get an email, you can reply. That'll let the servers know we're connected, and they'll come to your inbox. Tonight, please keep your questions and comments in the chat focused on tonight's topic. If you have questions about Midwest Women's Herbal and our work, you can go ahead and send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. We'd like to thank our sponsors who make hosting events like this possible: Moonwise Herbs, Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier Co-op, Host Defense Mushrooms, Goodland Creative, Peaceful Parlor, Herb Farm Pacific Botanicals, Great Lakes Herb Fair, Red Earth Herb Gathering, Wisconsin Mycological Society, the Driftless Folk School, DNA Hemp, Wish Garden Herbs, Four Elements, Jade Counseling, Wisconsin Public Radio, and National Awakenings Magazine. Sponsorships available to everyone at any levels, and the sponsorship supports many of the scholarships that we award every year. Visit our website for sponsorship opportunities for Mycelium Mysteries, In Our Own Hands, Wellness Series, and the Spring Herbal Conference. Midwest Women's Herbal has a virtual learning space. That's what this program is kicking off from tonight. The Herb Women Classroom has both free and paid offerings with hundreds of hours of learning available about mushrooms, herbs, nourishment, and personal growth. Every learning module comes with a monthly community Q&A with herbal educator Linda Conroy live on Zoom. Recordings from individual conference workshops are available as well, and complete conference packages. We're especially excited to announce registration is open for the 8th annual Mycelium Mysteries on September 20th through the 22nd. That's awesome. This weekend-long Women's Mushroom Conference will focus on understanding fungi as grandmothers of our ecosystems. Keynote speakers include Eugenia Bone, Rose Tursi, who's on the call tonight, and Susan Leopold. You can also create a customer treat during the week if the weekend timeframe doesn't work for you. There's many pre-conference workshops. Look for a follow-up email. We're sending out a special discount for those pre-conference workshops. You can make a foraging basket, learn about runes, attend an all-day foray, and there's a mushroom cultivation extravaganza. Reading the Body with Margie Flint is a special event in November. It's the 8th through the 10th at Bethel Horizons Retreat Center in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. It's a different location than the conference this fall. And did you know every line, color, and marking on the face, tongue, and nails holds meanings to your internal health? Margie will explain and demonstrate diagnostic techniques learned from the late William Lasassier and what she observed working with clients over her 40 plus years in practice. So both experienced and beginning herbalists will find great benefits from this immersion, and registration is open for that. Space is limited, so check it out now if you're interested. At the end of tonight's conversation, we'll be giving away a full recording package to this year's Mycelium Mysteries and a mushroom apron from Taproot Threads. So you need to be present, so stay on till the end, and we'll do that when we finish up. At this time, I'm honored to introduce Linda Conroy, visionary and founder of Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, Mycelium Mysteries, In Our Own Hands Women's Wellness Series, the Herb Women Classroom, and owner of Moonwise Herbs. She also offers in-person virtual herbal apprenticeship programs. Linda is a bioregional herbalist who's been practicing and teaching herbalism for over 30 years. I spent 3 years as an apprentice with Linda and a year as an intern with Linda. It was life-changing for me, so I highly recommend you checking it out and looking into all the programs that she offers. So, all right, welcome, Linda. I'll let you take it over.
Thank you, Shari, and thanks for sharing all that wonderful information with us. I'm super excited to be here with you all and to be in conversation with a very dear friend who has become a friend through mushrooms. And I love how mushrooms bring women together. That's one of the things that excites me about this whole mushroom realm and about our event called Mycelium Mysteries, which is a play on words about how mushrooms network and how women have a tendency to network with each other underground and unbeknownst to each other sometimes. So I'm excited to introduce you, Rose Tursi, and we invited Rose is going to be offering a keynote address at this year's 8th annual Mycelium Mysteries Conference next month. And so we thought it would be really interesting to talk with her a little bit about the topic that she's going to share on during her keynote, where she's not going to do her keynote, but she's going to talk with us a little bit about why would we want to acknowledge and talk about women in mycology and their role over time, and especially the early women, but also ourselves. And when we were talking before we came live with all of you, we were talking, I was asking Rose, how do you want to be introduced? Do you want to be introduced as a mycologist or a mycophile, which is what I would call myself? I wouldn't quite call myself a mycologist at this point in my time, even though I've learned a lot and I know a lot. I would still call myself a mycophile. And she said she was torn about it. So I'm, as far as introducing her, I'm going to call her a mycologist, and then maybe we can have a little chat about how she feels about that. So I'm going to read her bio as well for those of you who don't know her, so you can learn a little bit about her. But Rose Tursi is a mycologist. She's also an illustrator by profession. When she's not creating art, she loves spending time outside exploring the natural world. She's led forays and ecological walks for many organizations throughout the country and is an advocate of the community science to science movement. Her happy place is at the crossroads methods of art and mycology, and most recently has been experimenting and teaching paint making using fungi as the binder and pigment sources. She currently serves as the Visual Arts Chair for the North American Mycological Association. And Rose teaches a lot of classes in that realm for mycelium mysteries, and I know they're always really well received, and we just love having her at the conference. And I'm so excited to have you here tonight, Rose. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And yeah, I
Yes.
guess, yeah, in the conversation, it was, I usually describe myself as a myco enthusiast, but I say my mother, when she's bragging about me to her friends, calls me a mycologist. But I don't have a degree in the sciences. My degrees are in art. So for the people where that matters, I like to say that. But there are a lot of professionals working in mycology who don't have advanced scientific degrees either. So, and they call
And
themselves mycologists. So,
And when we were having that conversation, I said to you, if you were a man, you'd probably be much more confident saying, I am a mycologist. And I think just to dive right in, I think this really speaks to the early days of mycology when women weren't even invited into the academic realm. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's important to talk about these early female mycologists who really spent time expressing their scientific study of mushrooms through art, because that's where they were able to do it. They really weren't able to enter the academic setting. So I think we could probably dive right in there to talk about, like, why should we talk about this? Why should we talk about women in mycology?
yeah, and to backtrack a little bit what you just said, it's interesting to note that in the when women were first kind of entering the workforce, or even before then, before it was really considered socially acceptable for a woman to have a career, one of the few career paths that was open to women was art and illustration. And in fact, there are several mycologists that I speak about in my talk that were illustrators in addition to being mycologists. And maybe that's how they segued in. Yeah, so that's an interesting little tidbit. But you're right. Why do we talk about these women? I would say the main reason is there's so few of them and they're so amazing. I mean, I could count on my hands probably the number of women that were working in the field of mycology prior to 1900, which is where I kind of base my talk on, are women that were in before 1900, because there were so few and they had to be amazing to be successful, because if they were average, they wouldn't even, they had to be exceptional to even get the barest of recognition, because it was a man's world. That was the culture of the time, throughout Europe and North America.
Well,
So
I'm sure one of the women you'll probably talk about in your talk is Beatrice Potter. And that was, I think that's always a good reference point for people, because most people know who she is as an illustrator and an author, children's author. And I know for me, when I realized that she had been a mycologist, a serious studying mycologist, I was really surprised and delighted at the same time. But I think she's such a good example of what you're talking about.
exactly. And she, like I said, she was an illustrator first because that was a career path that was acceptable for a woman in Victorian England. And when she did write and submit papers, she was never taken seriously by almost anyone. It was an uphill battle, and she eventually gave up and just started writing children's books, which was more successful for her. And that's kind of sad that she really wasn't recognized as a mycologist during her lifetime. But she is now, which is good. And I do talk about her a lot in my talk, and we've talked about her at the last Mycelium Mysteries, Dr. Tess, who I don't know if she's on this call, but she and I co-led a workshop on Beatrix Potter specifically. So she's definitely a lady who gets named in my talk. one of a few.
Mhm.
I don't
Well, I
want to
know
give away too much.
well, when you did the workshop, I thought it was so interesting because you did an all-day foray and illustration workshop. And I thought it was so interesting that your intention was to go out and collect specimens the way she did it, that she had it was a methodology. It was very scientific. She had a way of collecting them and then bringing them back and illustrating them so they were, botanically correct. And that thoughtfulness and that intention and knowing that she, and I'm sure many of these other women, were going out and doing this as a field of study, not just as a cute art form, is, I think, really important and significant for us to be aware of and to bring into our consciousness.
Yeah, for sure. And that was really Tessa's idea. I just went along with it, but it was a great idea, but I want to give her credit. She's the one that came up with that idea of, let's do a foray the way she would have done it. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Let's do it.
Can you just name one thing that she would have done that would have been really unique and interesting?
She would have done. Well, I mean, I don't think it would be considered unique or interesting in 2024, but I think most of what she did in her day was unique and interesting to her contemporaries. She liked being alone off in the fields, off in the woods. She had a little horse that she rode around in the countryside when she was younger, I should say. When she was in her 20s, her family would spend the summers in the countryside, and she would had a little pony or something, and she'd take it off, and she'd get all mucky and dirty, and she'd just paint mushrooms and other things and plants and trees and little critters all day long. And I think that was considered really weird at the time. I think it's really cool, and I think a lot of people think it's
A little strange in our broader culture, but I know when we get together and gather in these women's communities, and I'll say to people, how many of you played in the woods and when you were a kid and got muddy and dirty? And most of us, I mean, Rose, you probably would raise your hand. I mean, how many of you, maybe we all, if you want to raise your hand out there, how many of you did that? And look at this, I'm seeing all these hands being raised. And so I think we have a really unique community that is attracted to being in the woods with mushrooms or plants, or or coming to an event like Mycelium Mysteries, which I would say that's one of, we said we would talk a little bit about why have a women's mushroom gathering. And I think that's one of the reasons, is to be together and have some camaraderie. I know you've been very enthusiastic about women gathering in this space. Could you talk about some of the reasons you appreciate women gathering around the topic of mushrooms?
It's just such a positive environment, and I learned some. I mean, I go there to teach, but I also learn a lot when I'm there, and I feel like I'm constantly learning throughout my life, and that's really what life's all about, is to be constantly learning and growing. And it's just a really cool environment. You're surrounded by ladies that are there and as enthusiastic about mushrooms as I am, which in my daily life, I'm kind of a weirdo amongst a lot of my friends, because I can yak about mushrooms for 3 hours and never lose steam. And they're just like, oh my gosh, you're obsessed with these. Can we talk about something else?
So being able to do it for 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, I go there and I just do nothing but talk about mushrooms, and everyone is just a totally engaged audience. And then they'll start talking about mushrooms, and it's like, yeah, and we just together we learn. And it's just a very, very positive environment. And for a lot of women, it's a very safe environment. That's something that's really matters to a lot of women. I just really like it there. It's very peaceful too. Right there with that nice lake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Water, and in the fall, certainly on the property where we go, there's lots of mushrooms. I mean,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
I've shared with you that the reason we even have this conference is that I was out in the woods well, when I went to the event for we had an herbal event in the fall 9 years ago, and I went out in the woods and there were mushrooms everywhere. Every step I took that year was particularly prolific. And all I thought as I was walking through the woods by myself was, we need a mushroom conference. And so then the next year we started Mycelium Mysteries. And so this is our 8th annual conference gathering to focus on mushrooms. And I always joke, I think the mushrooms, asked for the conference.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it was either last year or the year before. I think it was the year before, where it was an abnormally dry year and there was almost nothing. And we still managed to find a lot, but I was a little worried for a minute there when I was going out leading this foray. I'm like, oh, this might not be a really fun foray, but it turned out to be pretty good. We found things. So even in the worst season, that place in Almond produces the mushrooms. So yeah, for sure. It's a perfect
Well,
location.
yeah, it really has a lot of diversity and a lot of things to look at. And I know Sarah, who does the ID table, brings in lots of mushrooms, and anyone who comes is welcome to bring mushrooms for ID, and they can end up on the ID table as well. So so that's certainly, we can all engage. That's another thing I really enjoy about being there, is that we all get to engage together and contribute. And so I think it's interesting what you talked about earlier, the citizen scientist movement, which is in your bio as well. I don't think everyone knows what that is. Do you want to talk a little bit about like citizen science and how we as women can contribute to citizen science? Like what our role might be in that?
Yeah, and another name for it is community science. It's a little more inclusive. And basically it's the idea that anyone can contribute to science, and specifically in this case mycology. If you want to be a community mycologist, sometimes it's as little as joining a local club or volunteering with a local organization like Fundus or NAMA. That's, I'm the arts chair for NAMA, which is the North American Mycological Association. And that is all of North America, Canada, the US, and Mexico. And their whole mission, it's a 501c3 nonprofit, and their whole mission is to pursue and advance and educate the science of mycology. And it's primarily run by amateur volunteer mycologists. So all of these people do something entirely different in their day jobs, but their passion or their hobby, or maybe a side whatever, is mycology. So they do a lot of vouchering, which is when you go to a foray and we go out in the woods, you collect, and this is where new species are discovered. When you voucher, you study what habitat it was growing in. You take in-situ photos. You might upload them to iNaturalist or Mushroom Observer, which are also websites dedicated to community science. And you might send them in for DNA sequencing, because that's become a very affordable thing in the last few years. That's a great way that you can advance mycology, because most mycologists are busy teaching or in a lab, or you don't have to be. There's field mycology is a real thing, and most of the people trekking off into the woods and looking in the mush, lots of them are not mycologists, per se, in the term that it's their job or it's their degree, but it's their passion. And so yeah, that would be an excellent way if you wanted to get involved in that world and be a community or citizen scientist.
Shari was asking if you would repeat the first organization that you mentioned.
Oh, Fundus is short for Fungal Diversity Survey. It used to be called the Mycoflora Project when it first formed, and then it's kind of reorganized under the new name. I believe it's just fundus.org is the website. But they're another nonprofit that is similar to NAMA. They're really focused on studying and sequencing new species and looking for rare fungi. They have the Rare Fungi Challenge, and they have different regional ones. So there's the West Coast Rare Fungi Challenge is the one I'm most familiar with, because I'm in Washington State. And they do like mycoblitzes where you can go out and look for mushrooms. And by the way, these 10 species are really rare and we're looking for more of them. We want to see where they grow, when they grow, you know, and the best way to find this information is to get hundreds of people in the woods looking for it. So you should sign up and do the Rare Fungi Challenge for your region if you want to. That's kind of a really fun and fungal way to get involved. And it's, you know, you could be anybody and do something like that. Anybody able-bodied that can go trek in the woods. So, or
Well,
even
it
get
was
to the park.
It was fun. I just went to the NAMA trip to Mexico. We were talking about that, and it was so interesting to me because there were a lot of young Mexican mycologists, actually academically trained, and then we also met some people from villages and communities that were more, you know, traditionally trained. And the academic mycologists are really looking at some mushrooms that look really similar to the European species, and this is happening all over the world, where they're, when they DNA sequence, it's actually a different species, but because, you know, of the general, you know, overriding community that's imposing the European names onto some of the mushrooms, it's so interesting to go and navigate that and look at the mushrooms that are actually there and see that they actually are different species when you're looking at them. So that's what you're part of what you're talking about, is that, you
Yeah,
know,
and the reverse of that too. So we are discovering, oh, this mushroom that grows in Europe and grows in North America that looks identical, and we previously thought it was the same, but with DNA we realize they're related, but they're not the same species. Well, the opposite of that is also true, where we find mushrooms with a circumpolar distribution, meaning despite the fact that this species was found in, say, England, and this species was found in, say, Washington, they're identical species. Now, how is that if they're so far apart? Did the spores somehow navigate to North America, or from North America to Europe? Or, you know, did it come because of humans, or because through air currents? There's a lot of questions there. And who knows? I mean, there are definitely invasive or non-native fungal species all over the world as well. And that's another part of the science, is figuring out the origin story there.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fascinating to me for sure. We had a question in the chat from Kelsey, and she's saying, you've mentioned Beatrice Potter is one of the more easily recognizable or well-known women in the history of mycology. What other in the history of mycology, what other women do you think are personally inspirational and or deserving of more recognition?
Well, I actually have a whole list that I talk about in my talk. Yeah, I don't know if I should give it all away or mention anyone. You know what I can do is maybe we can talk about some of the women who are super influential and I really love them, but they didn't really make my cutoff point. So I made my cutoff point in 1900. There were some really amazing women that were a little bit out of that time frame that I am super inspired by. And you know, it can go back to that question you were just talking about mushrooms being renamed because they're found to be new species. A really good example of a woman and a mushroom would be Irene Mounts. I don't know how many people have heard of her. She's not super ultra famous like Beatrix Potter, but she was an amazing mycologist. Her heyday was more like in the 30s, the 1930s. And she was Canadian, and she studied mostly the mating systems of wood rotting fungi and polypores. So real sexy stuff, like the mating systems of fungi. Um, and and she had a 25-year career. First of all, she was I think the first woman to earn a higher degree in her field. She had a PhD, and she worked in mycology, but believe it or not, she got married when she was in her like late 40s, or maybe she was 50, and she had to retire despite this 25-year illustrious career. She had to retire when she got married because at the time in Canada, married women could not hold jobs by law. Can you believe that? I
Say
was
that again. Just say that again.
I was blown away. Yeah, I have her in my notes. 1955 is when they changed that law. Prior to 1955, married women could not hold a job in Canada. If you were married, you couldn't have a job. And I just, it's just amazing, like, you know, things we take for granted today, even though we're still fighting for, you know, a lot of rights as women, but it's just amazing how much harder it was not that long ago, 1955. But getting back to what I was saying
Can
about,
I just say one quick thing about that? This is one of the reasons I think it's important for us as women to keep talking about this, because there are things, you know, we've seen regression in women's rights, and knowing about her story helps us to stay alert to the potential for regression. And I think that's an important point to know, that these things happened not that long ago, and that there always is potential for things to happen again. And so I really appreciate knowing dates like that and being aware. So thank you. And I think that's part of the reason I feel passionate about talking about this.
yeah, and the getting back to my other point, what sparked me to bring her name up specifically when you were talking about European mushrooms and North American mushrooms and the names changing. So one of the mushrooms she studied a lot was Fomitopsis panicula, which is the red-belted conch. It's super common here in Washington State. You do have it in Wisconsin, but it's less common. And it kind of looks like a reishi, but it's and darker color, and it has a red band. Her name is Mounce, with Mounce, I think. Actually, hold on. Yeah, Mounce. I had it right here. Let me write that in the chat. I just typed this.
Our
really
team
quick.
can pop it in the chat, Rose.
Green Mounce. There we go. That's her name, how it was spelled. So when they were doing DNA sequencing on this mushroom in North America, and all of her studies were in North America, they realized, oh, this mushroom is a different species here. So I want to say it was really recent, like 2021 or 2022. They renamed it, and they renamed it Fomitopsis mountziae in her honor. So that's a really cool tidbit. So that's the North American name for the red-belted conch. So if you have an older guidebook, it might have the old name, but this is the current name is Mountziae. So
That's really amazing, because we know, and you know, I enter this from the plant world as an herbalist, and we know that in botany there are very few women that plants are named after, and I think that's true for mushrooms as well. So having that mushroom named, have her name reflected, is really important and significant. So as you're talking, I wanted to share another mycologist that I think is important to name, who spoke at our conference, I think the second year, and I don't think you were there yet, Rose. We had Cardi Raper, who was a PhD mycologist, come and speak at our event. And one of the things, and again, this is from my herbal hat, I started typing in the herbal world, we have lineages and we honor our elders. And, you know, as women, we have this tradition of doing that. And I was trying to impose my thinking on the mushroom world. And I was like, where are the mushroom grandmothers? I wanted to find them. And the only name at that time that came up on the internet was Cardi Raper. And so I thought, I'm going to contact her and see if she'll come to our conference. So I wrote to her, and she was an academically trained PhD lab scientist, who has a whole story of her own. And she was in her 90s, agreed to come and speak at our conference. And it was such a delight. And she also studied the reproductive nature of a particular fungi. I'm not sure if you know which one it was. I can't say which mushroom it was, but she also studied the reproductive nature. And she took over her husband's lab after he died. She went back to school and got her PhD. And she wrote a book about their relationship, about the reproduction of mushrooms. And so I just wanted to mention her too, because I think she's someone who I would see in that realm of being a woman who really stood out in her time as well. And I don't know if anybody could look up the name of her book and pop it, because she wrote a book called Sex, Love, and Mushrooms, or something along those lines. It was a catchy title. Do you know anything about her?
You know, I do know of her, but I don't know enough to speak about her off the cuff. Uh, I do know who you're talking about though, and I have heard that book name, and I haven't read it. But I think I have to find it and read it.
Yeah, I
So
would
I just wrote a
encourage
little
you.
note to look her up afterward and kind of read up on her. Maybe I'll add her to my talk, even though she's uh not the right time frame. Who knows? I broke my rule. I'm thinking about adding Irene Mounts, even though she's not in my. She's so cool that there's so many cool ladies. And I have to fill an hour, so maybe I'll add a few more. We'll see. There's a lot of
Kelsey,
exceptional women. I couldn't possibly talk about every exceptional woman in mycology in one talk. It would have to be a whole lecture series to get them all, but I want to
absolutely.
get a lot of the best ones.
Yes. And Kelsey looked up the book is called Love, Sex, and Mushrooms, Adventures of a Woman in Science. So, and what, you know, it was really touching to me because she came and spoke and she was in her 90s. I mean, she talked about her research, and then Sarah Fultz Jordan interviewed her for a workshop because she didn't really want to do a whole workshop. And then sadly, she died the very next year. And it
Wow.
was such an honor that that she had come and she had spoken, and she loved being there. She said it was very different than, you know, because she was used to academic conferences, so being at our conference was really fun for her. So it was just really special place in the mycelium mysteries, her story. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what I should do in my final draft of the talk I'm giving is make a few exceptions for exceptional ladies, especially women who specifically touched women involved with mycelium mysteries. That might be a good one. Maybe we'll
Well, and I
see.
know somebody else you might be able to speak to, and you know, her name came up a lot when I was in Mexico, of course, is Maria Sabina, being one of our foremothers who, you know, really had a lot of challenges in her life, as I would call her a mycologist in her own right, and being a grandmother of, you know, holding space. Just wondering if you have any comments about her life or her work.
Yeah, so she's an interesting one. She's not in my talk, mainly because she's not the right time frame, and also she's really there's actually a lot out there about her. There's whole entire talks and books written about her. So the information is out there for anyone who wants to learn about her. She was exceptional, and unfortunately, I feel like she was really kind of taken advantage of at the time and was not treated very well at all. Um, and another reason I didn't really consider her, although maybe I'll add a little something about her in my honor. Maybe I'll just rewrite my whole lecture. Who knows? Um, another reason I didn't really consider her in my first draft was she wasn't a scientist. She was a shaman. She was like and she lived in a village in rural Oaxaca, Mexico. And she grew up in poverty, which I don't know. I mean, those are not bad things. That's just what she was. But I really do feel for her though, because after she kind of revealed, you know, magic mushrooms or psilocybe mushrooms to the Western world, uh, people descended on her little village and just wanted to know all this information and really upset the whole culture and dynamic of where she lived, and really threatened it, because it was all these outsiders coming in and just messing things up. And she was really persecuted, not just by the people in their village, because they saw her as the reason all these bad things were happening. At one point, her house got burned down, her son was murdered, all kinds of really bad things happened to her. And I know she had said she regretted ever showing anything to anyone after that. It's just a sad, honestly, her story is mostly very sad to me. um
And I think it's a cautionary tale too. When as you're talking, I'm thinking about the fact that I know she made some comments during her life. One, that some of the people who were coming to her weren't sick, and she saw psilocybin as a medicine.
Yeah.
And so people were coming and engaging with it from a recreational standpoint, which is really different than, she was a shaman and a healer. And then the other piece is that she didn't want to say no because she was a healer, and healers don't say no. And I think that that's a very female trait as well, is to be really open and not always set the best boundaries as we could, on the one hand. And then to mention, I mentioned that I was in Mexico with Nama last week, and we went into 2 different villages where these women were in their traditional setting where they had grown up harvesting mushrooms, and they took us out and showed us their mushroom spots, and they're very far away from anywhere, and they're still there's this whole ethnomycology realm that I think is so worth exploring, and these relationships. I was really excited because I think Nama is trying to develop relationships with these villages and these cultures and the indigenous people, and that seems really important as well in terms of, so there are many unnamed indigenous women who are mycologists that I saw even last week. That was very cool.
Yeah, and someone wrote in the comments that Maria Sabina are the true scientists for whom we owe our knowledge. And you know what? I should acknowledge that. She may not be a scientist in like the strict definition of the word, but if it weren't for her, we probably wouldn't know anything about psilocybin. And it kind of, unfortunately, due to it becoming a street drug or a recreational drug, it kind of, any scientific advancement with it in the medical field kind of got halted for a few decades, but thankfully there's a renaissance of that now. But we wouldn't know anything about it if it weren't for her. So in a certain sense, that's probably one of the hugest modern contributions to mycology. So good point, MG Hornick. Thank you.
And what I was seeing last week is that these women were in the field. They knew their mushrooms. It was a way to feed their family. And one older woman even said to us, being here on our land, eating our food, eating the mushrooms is our form of resistance. And that really struck me too. Here are these women who are, have been feeding their family for generations and learned, there were little kids out there mushrooming, and that was just really fascinating to me that, we can see that there are people who are carrying this and who are scientists in their own right. Yes, for sure. Not the academic science realm, but it's a dilemma, you were grappling with even yourself.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So what do you have any other things that you would like to say about women and mushrooms, female and funga, or as Juliana Furkey likes to call it? Anything else that you want to add to this conversation for tonight?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Juliana's name. You should know she actually gave a talk on women in mycology that is for NAMA, and it's available online. It's on NAMA's YouTube channel. And it's really completely different from mine because she really focuses more on ethnomycology and folklore, and even like gets a little bit into witchcraft and stuff like that. And she really only brings in like actual women working in science at the very end, and it's really more vague and broad, and she doesn't really talk about any specific women. But it's a fun little lecture, and it's not long. It's maybe like 30 or 40 minutes, and it's on YouTube. It's Juliana Furci. How do you spell that? It's like
Furci.
yeah,
Furci.
Furci. And I know you can find it on NAMA's website if you go to namyco.org, and you can click on their webinars, and they're all incredible webinars, and they're totally free. And there's even a couple that I'm on. And hers is one of the early ones because I want to say it was back in 2020.
We
That's when I
popped
started.
We popped it into the chat, Shari.
There you go.
You.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that the same one? That's not. Yeah, well, that's not the link I'm thinking of, but
Look, I'm looking
might
for
have-
it. I popped in her website, but I'll look for the YouTube link and put it in there.
it's go to namyco.org, and then it's under events or webinars, and you could just click or send the whole link to all the it's just a list of webinars with links, and it has hers and many others. They're all really worth watching.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Juliana, because I think she is someone, even though she's, she's a modern day current force. Some of the work she's doing, especially, about the concept of flora and fauna and flora, is something, a term we've all heard as growing up, that mushrooms were not included in science. They weren't even included, let alone women in mushrooms. But she, has really encouraged even governmental forces and educational institutions to start saying flora, fauna, and fungi, and including the mushrooms in. And that's a radical to me, to see that kind of advocacy that she's doing, trying to get into institutions that affect our thinking about these things, to have us start seeing mushrooms as a valid entity. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that and her work in that realm.
Well, her work is amazing, and she's another person who doesn't have an advanced degree in science or mycology, as far as I know. But she's a mycologist, and in fact, she is the first female Chilean mycologist. Just to show you, it's still such a male-dominated field. She's working today. She's like my age, and she's the first woman in mycology in her country. They won't. Yeah, that's true. They're not listed. You have to go through the NAMA website. That's why I was trying to give you the link, which is there. Sherry mentioned it. Sorry, I got interrupted. Sorry, the chat's doing this on the side, and I can't help but look.
Yeah, we'll take care of the chat. Don't worry about
Okay,
that.
maybe I should minimize it so I don't see it.
Yeah. And we can send, just to mention to everybody, we usually do a summary, and we can send some follow-up links in the summary that we send to everyone too.
Yeah, and I can get the direct link. I know exactly where to get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the flora, fauna, and fungi. I say that too all the time. I love that. Absolutely love that. And it's interesting, on one hand we say, there's so few people working in ecology, but the fungal kingdom it wasn't recognized as a kingdom before, was it 1909? So like some of the women on this call are older than the fungal kingdom, as we call it, or as we recognize it, or categorize it, I should say, as humans categorize things.
And funga is a legitimate term. The one thing, I think people have kind of thought that we were using it as a nod to women, but it's not. It's an actual legitimate scientific term, but it also fits in with the feminine, well, I don't know what the word is, but the feminine, form of funga.
I didn't actually consider that. I just like seeing it recognized. Yes, we have animals, we have plants, and we have mushrooms, flora, fauna,
Yes.
and fungi. I like it.
And funga flows really nicely with the flora, fauna, and funga. All right, so we've talked about some women in history. We've talked about some more modern day women. We've encouraged, hopefully, women to consider, participating in science and engaging with mushrooms. So do you have maybe just a couple tidbits or a couple words of advice or guidance that you could give women to either begin a mushroom journey or to continue expanding or deepening their mushroom journey?
Well, I'd say join your local mushroom club. There's one in nearly every state. And actually, you can, if you go, I'm sorry to keep plugging NAMA, but I work for them. But if you go to NAMA's website, they have a list of all their affiliated clubs. There's about 100 of them. I know many of you are in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Mycological Society is amazing. They lead forays and events throughout the entire state. That's a great way to get started. That's really how, I mean, I grew up foraging with my dad and my uncle, but I really started to learn about, taxonomy and, identifying mushrooms and more than just eating them when I joined a mushroom club. I learned the whole ecology of mushrooms when I joined a mushroom club. Um, and really that's where it all started for me. Uh, that's the
And
best way
so,
to describe, yeah.
yeah, and certainly, gathering together with other people through those avenues also, those are all topics that we try to cover at Mycelium Mysteries as well. And I know for women, sometimes, at least starting out in a women's space, can really feel, like you said earlier, safe in terms of really starting to explore that stuff. And then, I know for me, that's felt really like a good thing to do, and then go out and be in the larger realm where there's a little bit more dominance of as there tends to be most places in our society, of the male voice.
Yeah, I
So
should say I kind of maybe took it for granted that most of the women on this call are planning on attending Mycelium Mysteries already. But if you're fence sitting, that is an amazing way to just deep dive and immerse yourself in the world of mushrooms. Is come to Mycelium Mysteries. There's something for everyone, whether you're a beginner or a super advanced expert. You will learn something and you will have a good time at Mycelium Mysteries. I'm flying all the way from Washington State to be there. So
I know we're so honored and lucky that you do that, because you do have so much to offer. And I every time I talk to you, I learn something so about mushrooms, and just really grateful for your time tonight. Just wondering, want to see if anybody has any last questions before we get into, we're going to do some just wrap up with Shari, and then we're going to do our giveaways. But does anybody have any last burning questions that you want to throw out there for us tonight before we transition?
There was a question in the chat from Wendy that said, do you have examples of women erecting job services from home using fungi? I asked if that was the right word, erecting, trying to figure out and get some clarity around her question, because I wasn't quite understanding it. Maybe just finding jobs and services from home.
well, yeah, sure. You can cultivate mushrooms and sell them. I don't know how easy that is to do on a commercial scale, but I cultivate and grow mushrooms. I live on almost 10 acres in the woods here in Pierce County, Washington. So kind of near Olympia, Tacoma area, South Puget Sound. And I live in the woods like some weirdo hedge witch, but I've got my mushroom logs, and I've got my beds of stropharia in my garden. I mean, I'm growing corn smut this year. I got huitlacoche that I ate some for lunch just before this call. And I don't try to sell my mushrooms, but if I upped my scale a little bit, I certainly could. You can, if you're an artist, there's lots of mushrooms are really hot right now, actually. You can make money selling mushroom art, or I'd work in surface pattern design. My mushroom designs are my best sellers. You know what I've been doing? I've been buying, this is really an expensive hobby that I haven't made profitable yet, but I've been buying vintage slip cast molds, like Arnell's mushrooms. They're a lot like the Sears Roebuck Mary mushrooms. So you used to see the pottery in antique stores and thrift stores. I've been buying the original molds and slip casting my own set of Arnell's mushrooms pottery for my kitchen. And maybe I'll bring a few pieces to Mycelium Mysteries if I can get them on the plane. We'll see.
I saw some pictures of them that you shared.
Yeah, if you follow me on social media, I'm better about posting on my personal Facebook. I have an Instagram and a public Facebook, and I'm not very good at using them to market myself, but I definitely occasionally post. So it's just at Tursi Art if you want to add me on Instagram or Facebook. But yeah, I've been posting about them a little bit there, and it's mostly been fun. it's been a fun little side project that maybe I'll sell them and make some of my money back, but these molds were not cheap, so I don't think I don't think I'm going to make my money back really, but I'm having a lot of fun.
So it looks like the question was actually more historic in relation to the concept of women breaking into and not having jobs in mycology, but breaking in and doing different things. I think like Beatrix Potter turning to illustration, and what did other women do? What are some of the things that they did to break into the field?
Historically, a lot of the women that are recognized in mycology were really, in some cases, they were married and their husbands were scientists and they assisted their husbands in the lab. That was a
Right.
case for a few of the women I'm going to talk about. Yeah, that's actually the case. A few, like 3 different women in my talk. That's pretty much how they segued in, is they married into it, I guess. And in a lot of the guy running the lab, which couldn't, or their husband, kind of took credit historically, and it's only been more recently that we're learning, like, a good example would be Fanny Hess. She she basically invented the petri dish, the agar plate as we use it today. That was hers. I don't think she ever got credit for it during her life. And she wasn't actually in mycology. She worked in microbiology, but we use agar in mycology as well. It's a standard thing to, and that's all hers. And I think the guy in charge of the lab where she was working basically took credit for it. So there you go. There's a kind of I mean, they're not really good examples. It kind of stinks for women, unfortunately. We have to
Well,
change that slowly,
yeah, we
baby
need to talk
steps.
about it, and be aware of it, and try to shift that for sure. That's one of the reasons I think we need to talk about this for sure. So Brooklyn was asking, and I know we don't really have a bunch of time to talk about this, but I think you've sort of answered this question already. She was talking about wanting safety tips for foraging or foraying. And honestly, I think your answer would be similar to what I'm thinking, is do what you said, go out and join clubs and gather with other people, come to Mycelium Mysteries where we have forays throughout the weekend, engage with other people who are knowledgeable and go out in the woods with them. Those are and then of course, learn to use your ebooks, and even if you want to go take a course or a class, do that as well. But I wonder, do you have anything else to add to that? I mean, without going into
Yeah,
maybe.
I would say never go foraging by yourself in the woods, no matter how confident you might feel. Like, I'm super confident. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I would never go in the woods by myself. And that's not, part of it is because I'm a woman. I don't want to be a woman alone in the woods with some creepers out there, but anything can happen, even if I were a dude. You could fall and break your leg, or you trip and hit your head, and then if you're by yourself, you're dead. Who's gonna find you? Um and another thing I would say is, well, at least this is true in Washington State. I always wear blaze orange in the woods because if something is always in season out here. So you don't want to get mistaken for a deer or who knows what else. So that's kind of, that might be regional specific for me, but it's worth saying. And this is kind of the dumb one that everyone says, but don't eat anything unless you're 150% sure what it is. Um, I love eating mushrooms, but I never eat something the first time I find it, even if I'm pretty confident if I know what it is. And I don't really, even when I'm foraying in groups and I'm teaching, and I have enthusiastic people that are really interested in learning about mushrooms for food and medicine, and I find something that I know is a perfectly edible mushroom, I always caution them, only eat a little bit the first time, because it's really weird, intolerances and allergies. Chicken of the woods is a really good example. Letoporus. There's a lot of people that really can't tolerate that mushroom for whatever reason. Like 30% of people will get an upset stomach from it. So I always tell people with anything, even with morels, just eat a little bit, eat one, eat a little bit, see how it settles. And then if you like it and tastes good and it doesn't bother you, then eat a lot the next time. And yeah, go out with an expert and follow their lead. And it's not really all about eating mushrooms either. I mean, to me, I just
No.
like looking at them and learning about them and how they interact in the environment is a big part of it for me too.
And it seems to me that's really the best first focus, is to enjoy looking at them, looking at the detail, paying very close attention to detail. And I would really discourage people from using apps. I know that's very popular right now, but I was reading an article and they were saying, at least for plants, and it's probably some accuracy for mushrooms too, the best app is only 70% accurate. And for me, that's not good enough. So really learn your identification skills, take the time to do it, pay attention to detail, go out with other people, engage, and really take your time. As Rose is saying, don't be so anxious to eat something. It'll be there next year when you're more confident you can eat it. So people are saying in the chat, every mushroom is edible at least once. And
If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd have many dollars.
yes, and then the other saying I really like, there are old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but no old bold mushroom hunters. So be cautious, be mindful, and when you're excited, just don't jump into something and eat it. Just enjoy and appreciate it as much
Yeah.
as you can. So
And
I
those,
think
and those apps aren't, I don't directly poo-poo them. They're a useful tool. They can get you in the right direction, but don't rely on them for your identification.
no.
They are right a lot of the times, and even when they're not completely right, they'll at least get you to the right genus oftentimes. Yeah, they're a good tool, just like an identification book for your region is a good tool, and going with someone who's familiar with the mushrooms is a good tool. They're all useful, and then all together, they make up a good array of stuff to learn with. So
Right.
yeah, have
And
those apps on
certainly,
your phone. Have those apps on your phone. Use them, but don't rely on them, and don't take anything they say as gospel or for granted.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, double check and have triple checks and make sure other things match what you're seeing. All right, well, we could keep talking about this topic for, for hours. And so we're going to start to wrap it up, but thank you so much, Rose. It's always such a delight to talk with you and talk mushrooms. And I can't wait to see you in September.
I know, I can't wait either.
Yes, so I'm going to
It's
turn
right
this
after my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah.
So gonna turn it over to Shari and she's gonna do the giveaway. So everybody stick around for that.
Great. Thanks, ladies. Really engaging chat. There were a couple people that had a few comments too about curious what everybody else would like to know and study regarding the health benefits. MG's coming to the conference. And then somebody also mentioned about dying with mushrooms. And I know both of those topics we've had before. I know we're definitely going to have some things about health in the future. Rose has worked with painting and art utilizing mushrooms. With dying and things like that. So, all right. Okie dokie. So let's go ahead and I think we'll give the conference recording away first. And when I announce your name, you're going to send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com so we can contact you. So we're going to give away the full recording package to Mycelium Mysteries. You'll hear Rose's keynote along with the other ladies. Let's see here. Let me change my screen. All right. We're going to go with Judith DeSays. Judith. All right, Judith. So go ahead and send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com. Courtney, go ahead and pop that in. And we have these cool new mushroom aprons by Taproot Threads. Those are really awesome. So we're going to go ahead and give one of those away. So I'm just scrolling through to pick somebody. Charlene Stiles. Charlene, go ahead and send an email to herbwomen@gmail.com to receive your apron. And past community conversations like this one are archived on the Herb Women classroom. So Please watch for our newsletter, visit our social media platforms for future conversations. We just did one with Eugenia Bone, another keynote speaker. That was just in July, so be sure to go check that out if you're still thinking about attending. She's a woman, Linda talked with her for a little while, so you can check all that out. We'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight's event, especially Linda and Rose, for this powerful and thought-provoking conversation. I really enjoyed learning about some of the women that kicked off the field of mycology. So we look forward to seeing you all in the Midwest Women's Herbal events. Thank you and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.